everyone, and welcome. I'm Kendra Larson. I'm the Archer Gallery Director and Clark Arts Talk Coordinator. Today we have the wonderful Bonnie Paisley. Bonnie received her BFA from RISD, Rhode Island School of Design, and her MFA from Portland State University. She is the owner of Paisley Studios, a community fine art studio in Portland, Oregon that offers grounding support to artists of all skill levels through visual art instruction and an affordable membership program for women artists. She's also showed internationally and nationally in New York, Germany,
Louisiana,
LA, and she's very active in the local art scene, and we're really excited to hear about her artwork today, as well as her community building. So let's welcome Bonnie Paisley.
All right. Thank you.
Great. And which
All
one
right.
is
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Hello. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. 10 o'clock on a Monday, and it is May 4th. So this is May the 4th be with you. That's why I started with this photograph of myself from some kind of school carnival. I think I must have been, I feel like this was maybe 1983. I think I was maybe like lower elementary, maybe like second grade. I don't know exactly. I was young, yes, and I'm eating a cookie there. So, and so I put together this talk about my work. I wanted to have you guys take away 3 kind of major things from this presentation. One of them is that I kind of have an everything, everywhere, all at once approach to materials, methods, influences, so that will hopefully come across. I use color and ornament very specifically. So I define ornament as like something that you that kind of you put onto a surface, so it enhances the object that carries it, either by making something that's very banal a little more sensual, a little more kind of beautiful, or it can be kind of utilitarian, like it can be used to link things together, unify. So that's how I define ornament. Color, I'm very specific about my color. I want my color to remind you of something, to evoke feelings, memories. So I'm very conscious about how I use color. And I always start and return to drawing. So those are the 3 things that hopefully you'll see in the work. I did go to art school in the 90s. So this was before we had any kind of digital life. So we would sit around in our college apartments and we would take blurry photographs and develop them on Kodachrome, regular photos. So we never knew how they were going to come out. This is some of my roommates, and we would, these kind of put your camera at your hip and do a long exposure. It felt very artsy. So some of the good things about going to an art school, it was like a massive skill building. And it was very, like you could do a lot of different things. There was a lot of materials you could learn about. I felt like that was a really good stretching your creativity. I also learned really early on how to self-advocate. I decided to go into illustration, which I quickly just learned that was not the major for me. And so once you're when you're 18 years old and they ask you what you want to do, I was like, oh, illustration sounds safe. Maybe I could get a job. And then shortly thereafter, I'm like, I don't want to be in this department. I'm not sure I can, like the structure of it was like, a client would come to you and give you like an assignment. I wasn't very good I didn't see myself following assignments that well. So I was a little bit, so I self-advocated and I was able to do my independent studies in printmaking and painting department, just kind of to get me through the rest of the school. which was a really good lesson. And then sort of the harder things about school, here I am after college. They don't really tell you how to be an artist. They don't give you a whole lot of advice about what do you do? How do you make your life in art? How do you balance like having a life, having a job, making money, having a studio, making work? How do you form an art community after you leave school? So I think that the professors that I listened to they just said, okay, you get a studio, you go there every day, you go to grad school, you become a teacher, you work in your studio over the summer, and that's it. So there was no other like options. And so I sort of took that advice and I was like, okay, I'm gonna get a studio, I'm gonna go there every day and try to go to grad school. And so I feel like I probably made the decision to go to graduate school too early. I should have probably lived a little bit of life before I went into graduate school, but I did go to Portland State. So this is me before I entered Portland State, taking myself very seriously. And once I got to graduate school, I realized I would have to start putting together my own work and my own inspiration, and had no idea how to do that. So I started to actually look at my maternal line, so the women in my family, my mother, my grandmother. So these photographs, this is my mother swimming. And again, these photographs are developed in that Kodachrome old camera technology, and so the color is super vibrant and kind of strange and dark. And then this is a photograph of from my grandmother's house, and her house was kind of just so, and she had all these kind of like glass containers filled with this ribbon candy, and I used to look at that and think it was the most beautiful object I'd ever seen in my life, with the sun shining through it. So those are some things I started thinking about when I was trying to make work. And I also began collecting a lot of images of vintage home decorating magazines. So I started thinking about my grandmother's home and the time that she was raised in. And I started collecting these kind of sort of strangely colored interiors. I feel like the printing inks and the paper from these old magazines was very attractive to me. They had kind of this strange, vibrant color, but it was always a little bit off in some way. So I started making collages with these magazines and cutting them up to look sort of like these kaleidoscopic images. And then I would paint them on wood. So these are oil on wood. And so I was cutting out the wood in a circular way, and then I was painting. And I started thinking about the people that might have occupied these spaces. So women like my grandmother that were kind of in the home. They took a lot of pride in their home. These images kind of have a lot of sort of nostalgia to them. I think that nostalgia is something that you have to be a little bit careful with. It means basically longing for home. And I think right now, nostalgia can be hard because we're engaged in this sort of project of restorative nostalgia, which is we're trying to get back to a place, or people are telling us to get back to a place that maybe we don't all want to go back to. But the longing part of longing for a home. So I'm more interested in like a reflective nostalgia where you're thinking about maybe a home that never really existed and you're kind of trying to construct something, for yourself that maybe, truly maybe didn't exist or hasn't existed yet. So a little bit about nostalgia. But this image, I feel like this was the first time that I tried to basically think of a painting as an object. So I was finishing this painting, and it was completely finished, and then I took it onto the bandsaw and I cut it up. So I sawed it up in half and in strips and put it back together and kind of rearranged it. So this is the first time I'm thinking about painting as an object and almost kind of becoming a sculptural object because I'm rearranging it. So at the same time that I'm collecting these home decorating magazines, I also run across these images of cakes, and they really match up with some of the art historical images that I collect. So you can kind of see the similarities here with this like ornamented frame and this like beautiful object in the center, and kind of this slide on the left, which is a medieval painting by Simone Martini. So I have these things in my studio, right? So I'm collecting these images. I'm starting to really get into these images of cakes. And I'm thinking of the cake as kind of this archetype, right? It's this very decorative, very ornamented, celebratory object. It's very ephemeral. It's very gendered. This was kind of something that a cake decorating would be would be an acceptable way for a woman to explore their creativity. Yes, it's very ironic when you look at the cake decorating manuals, because you have the men teaching the women how to do this craft, right? And so I think a lot of women probably learned it side by side with their mothers, but then it kind of became like a commercial thing where men became the experts and then taught the women, at least in the books, right? So they had the Wilton cake decorating manuals, right? So I started to really think about cakes as objects. And I think in grad school, again, I was trying to build a bunch of skills. So I decided I was going to start my second year of grad school teaching myself how to do this cake decorating. So I really perfected this skill, and that's something that I really like to acquire a lot of skill and learn something from the ground up, which I probably learned in art school. And then I end up kind of wanting to dismantle my skill in some way. So here I am in the studio blindfolded, decorating a cake blind. And so I'm kind of learning the skill and then trying to break it down and kind of unlearn it and make it messier. And then this is also I start to get into making sculpture. So when you're thinking about a painting, it's kind of assumed that a painting is going to hang on the wall. But in a sculpture, you have to really think about the viewer approaching that from any angle. So they can walk in and see it from any angle, and it is not necessarily something that hangs on a wall. And so that's the first time I think I've started to think about, you know, this idea of a sculpture. And then yes, this is all, yeah. So I have, my work starts to become more encrusted and more maximalist, kind of filled with these different techniques that I'm learning. I start to add things into the cake frosting. I start to, use these kind of cake forms really as just to hang on the wall and then have all this kind of detritus hanging off of this. So the work just gets messier, more maximalist. And then my studio after grad school starts to look like this. So I'm working on the wall. I'm starting to play around in that space that's sort of relief sculpture. So things are coming off the wall. And it's really looking kind of messy. And I kind of liked it. And then I got the opportunity to do this window commission. And I kind of threw this in here because I don't really like the way this came out. It's too buttoned up for me. So I was feeling a little bit shy about how kind of messy and maximalist my studio practice was. And so I think with this window commission, I tried to tighten it up. And I didn't like it. So that's kind of why I threw this in here. So it was a lot of work for not really I didn't have the result that I was looking for. So at the same time I'm doing this, these are kind of what's happening in the studio, right? So they're getting messy. I'm starting to add like light bulbs and curlers and, things into these sculptural works. These are done on insulation foam, and I've moved on from frosting and I'm using caulking, painter's caulking for some of that stuff. So I'm also living my life at the same time. So my life outside of the studio is starting to involve a little bit of mountain climbing. So this is my now husband and my dog. And I'm up on the top of South Sister. And so I'm sort of doing things in the outdoors that I'm pushing myself a little bit. And I'm seeing things like this. This is a picture of rime ice, which is wind-blown ice. And it's really reminding me of some of the things I like to do in the studio. So I'm starting to think about making collages again. I'm kind of back to sort of thinking about collages and working and making my own work. And I start to kind of add mountains and climbers and things that I'm doing outside the studio comes into the work. So I'm going to trace a little tangent here. So at that time, I make this collage and monoprint sort of drawing, and it's called Mountain House. And then what happens with that collage image is that it becomes a sculpture. So this is on the left is the drawing or the collage. This then gets cut out of wood, painted on, becomes this kind of bizarre encrusted sculpture that's over the top of a table, and it's kind of floating. And it's kind of looking like somebody shook out a landscape over this tablecloth, right? So it's kind of falling down on either side. It has some like furniture, some other materials. So starts as a collage, becomes a sculpture, and then I pick up another skill, which is stop motion animation. So this is just a clip, and you'll see the same image. Okay, so that's just a short clip. So starts as a collage, becomes a sculpture. Then I have this new skill, which I'm really jazzed about, which is how I make drawings and sculptures and collages move. So that is where the animation comes in. And let's see, oops, I want to skip that. Okay, and then I have this second version of this, and this is an animation that's actually on the sculpture. So it's the same thing, a woman vacuuming, but this is shot on the actual sculpture. All right, so does anyone get anxiety from the sound of vacuuming? I kind of do. Yes?
How long does a piece like that take you? So think of like the initial part of just you creating it, but then filming, so many
Mm-hmm.
scenes and making the smallest of adjustments.
Yeah, stop motion takes forever. It takes forever. So I don't know why I really like it in a lot of ways, but it does take quite a bit of time. So I have to like really commit when I'm gonna shoot, because it's also something it's hard to stop and start again, so. And I'll show some more of that as we go on. But so this is still what I'm kind of looking at in the studio. So I have a lot of images of Baroque art. This is a chapel in Rome that's completely ornamented with human skulls and bones. On the left is the Bernini. So ecstasy and death are kind of big themes. that I like to look at. But I also get things from pop culture. So this is something that that picture in the beginning, I was probably about that age when I saw this. Okay, so I saw that when I was a kid, and I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. You know, someone made that out of chocolate, and it was just so fascinating. It was a landscape, a beautiful landscape made of chocolate. So I try not to like have any kind of hierarchy with how I allow myself to be inspired. So sometimes it's commercials, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's art in whatever context, in a museum, in a gallery, in a outdoors. I also look at a lot of contemporary art, a lot of contemporary women artists. So these are some of those artists. And I keep all these influences somewhat organized. So I have this kind of running photographic reference of things that I'm inspired by, and I kind of try to write a little bit about them. So that kind of ribbon candy from my grandmother's house is kind of why I'm really obsessed with that cake decorating tool that makes that ribbon motion. It's very textural. I think of it, a lot of it, as an ecstatic line. So it's a way to make a line that's quite, energized. Flowers. So I try to make have some organization. I have a studio wall that's also plastered with a lot of these images that I'm collecting. So I keep those all around. This is another big influence in my life. I became a mother, and so having a child is something that, also kind of creeps in. So my life outside the studio is kind of creeping in always. So the pandemic hit, and this is going to be a clip of another animation I made during the pandemic. I was spending a lot of time at home in my pink bathroom. All right, so that was a little clip of that one, 2021. Yeah, you can ask.
Okay, so the audio in that really took it to the next level as far as kind of surreal, a little bit like
Yeah,
unsettling.
yeah.
How did you come up with the audio?
Sound is such a amazing thing to incorporate into this animation. So that I was Sarah Luella Baker is a collaborator that I've collaborated with, and she made the track. And so it was just kind of this like haunting kind of, I think if you're a mom, you hear like your kid calling you all the time. So it's this sort of repeated mama sound. And so that's how I kind of heard the track and then animated to that track. So you kind of load that in, and then you are working with the software to kind of make little changes, and you can hear the sound as you're working. So it is kind of an interesting thing to work with. Yeah.
And with looking at the piece, I know that like art obviously is up to like the interpreter as far as what they take from it. But what I think about when I saw the piece is that like as a mom, you're always giving, and so your child is like taking and consuming, and then you see her start to reflect that inward and like consuming of herself.
Yes.
Is that kind of like the purpose of the piece, is to show that like constant giving and how the relationship is with that?
Yeah, that's definitely a big aspect of it. Sort of like my feelings about motherhood are a little bit, they range from like, of course there's the happy times, and then there's the times as a mother and artist you feel really split between, your creative self feels a little bit strained in the giving to all of your creative. You feel like you're giving it away sometimes, so it's sort of striking that working with that balance. Speaking of little children, yeah, they're all out there. So that piece, so what I kind of want you to remember from that piece is that pink color. So that pink color is the actual pink color of my bathroom. And I've become that pink color has kind of stayed with me through. So this is some of the process shots from that animation. I'm using a technique called replacement animation. So you see all the little hands cut off there to the left. So you just sort of, each shot you replace an object, and that creates the kind of subtle movement. So here's all the eyes. So when she looks at different directions, I have these different eyes. These are all photographs of myself that I used. And then I set it up during the pandemic in my garage. So this is kind of my setup. My camera's above, and I'm shooting down. It's a really fun process, but it is incredibly time-consuming. So I'm going to talk a little bit about drawing, because that's something that I really, I return to drawing, and I sometimes start from drawing. So this is a drawing I did when I was a kid. It's Wonder Woman. And I continue to draw. So I'm making these drawings the whole time. I'm thinking about animation and sculpture and painting. Sometimes I'm really just making drawings. So these are some, and I think of drawing as under this huge umbrella. So there's a lot of activities that I would consider drawing that maybe, I don't try not to label things. So collage, a little bit of printmaking, a little bit of, maybe wet media. Sometimes my drawings, this is sort of something I drew with the caulking, so using those frosting techniques. Sometimes I'm using some watercolor, some spray paint. These are works on paper, basically. Here's another drawing that has some risograph printing in it. Here's another. So I like to have this kind of activity going on in the studio no matter what I'm doing. So there's always some kind of drawing activity going on as part of the process. So here's a little tangent here with these hands. So this is a drawing of my grandmother's hands. And I started thinking about hands and craft and making, and this is a little bit of an animation sketch with a hand motion. And then I'm thinking about more hands, becomes a little bit of a sculptural object, a relief sculpture. I'm using paint and velvet and risograph prints and foam core and let's see, that's it, yeah, I think that's it. And then it becomes, I make another one, and this is like a carved foam object with a little embedded animation inside it. So it has a little phone for the audio. This is my friend listening to it. And this is what this piece looks like. And again, this is where the mountain is going to show up again. So there's that kind of exploding volcano. This is another piece where I've got some domestic objects, in this case, kind of heirloom china. And I've made this sort of object that kind of looks like, you know, you leftover cake that got, or ice cream that kind of slid outside of these plates. This hangs on the wall, so kind of high relief, and it has this little embedded animation inside it. So that piece is called Treading Water. And this was made with about 81 little paintings on film. So this clear film that will take water media. So there I'm holding them all up. And then I thought, I don't know how many of you are art students, but I thought this would be an interesting, this is sort of the process shots of a painting. So I do also make kind of these relief and very brightly colored, encrusted kind of paintings. So, and this is sort of like how I would go about. These are some early shots, and then they reach a stage where they get cut up on a bandsaw and rearranged. So this is like where this painting was a while ago. And if you are in an art class and you are seeking feedback from someone, it is perfectly reasonable to ask to be very specific about the kind of feedback that you're looking for. So I took this to like a critique group, and I asked very specific questions about the piece. And it was really helpful to kind of guide the feedback, because sometimes in a class you can get this kind of nebulous, like, I don't know what to say. And so you as the artist can direct the kind of feedback you're looking for. So I was looking for thoughts about the color, the combination. Again, that pink from my bathroom is still there. And this is currently where the work is. So it's been really changed from the start. So it's cut up, rearranged, glued back together, added onto. And here's another kind of progress of this other painting. Again, there's the bathroom pink. And I keep going, adding some wood, kind of expanding off the original form. This is something I might do on my iPad. So I'm wanting to add in kind of a third color. And so I'm trying to test out like what color should I add. And I come across, when you mix this blue and this pink together, you get this strange kind of purple. And then that reminds me of that weird kind of gray lavender rose. And so I don't know if you go to the rose garden, you see them. They're a very strange, almost dead color. But I'm always fascinated by that because they're so different looking. But those roses are actually, they're called Amnesia, which I think is a really interesting title, because I am, with this piece, like thinking about sleep and forgetting and all that kind of thing. So this is where the piece is now. So it's mostly done. Who knows? I keep adding. And this is sort of somebody looking at it in the studio to give you an idea of size. They're kind of big. And this is the state of my current studio. It is pleasingly messy, which I lean into that. I'm not super organized as an artist. I mean, I have some organization that makes sense to me, but I do combine a lot of materials. A lot of activity going on, and so I'm hoping that it came across that I have this kind of broad approach to material and where I get my influences. I'm very, very faithful to like a drawing practice, and I love using color and ornamenting things. So this is sort of a little thing, a writing exercise I did, and it's a redacted Betty Crocker cookbook. So I think it's kind of fun. And then this is one last animation. I'm going to show this one in full. Kendra's seen this one before. So I also made this during the pandemic. So So that was that one. That kind of lived in my head for years before I actually got it together to make it. So I still feel like that figure it's actually made of gingerbread dough, that thing, and still haunting my dreams, really. And then my other project is my community studio. It's on 7th and Broadway in Portland. It's a lovely kind of shared space. I have memberships for women identifying artists. I teach classes there. It's been an LLC for about 8 years. and kind of the biggest lesson for me running that, other than running a business, is there's this huge, again, like this huge umbrella of art practices, and there's room for lots of different people under there. And so whatever, some of the members are just want a place to kind of come and tinker with whatever they're interested in. Some people are very regimented and use the studio same time every week for several hours. Some of them show their work and sell their work. Some of them are just kind of want a place to work and, you know, practice skills. And so it's all different kinds of people that are members there. And I'm pretty proud of like our range of ages that we have. And yeah, and that's where I have my studio, and that's that. So thank you for coming.
I was wondering about your sculptures, like when you have the animations, like do you just mount it to a screen, or like what kind of screen, how do you do that?
Like, how am I shooting on the sculptures?
Or
Or
like when you like display it, like the little screen that's like inside.
oh yeah. So they're embedded into the sculpture, so it's a screen and like a little media player. And so there are two like cords kind of hanging down, which usually, if it's in a gallery, you have this kind of gaffer tape to sort of hide the cords. And then they just have a little remote control, and then you turn them on. I'm sure it's annoying for the gallery attendant to kind of hear the sound all the time, but yeah, so that's how they're displayed. Yeah, so you only see the little hole with the screen. Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yes.
I know what Flash is, but these guys might not
Oh,
know
yeah.
what Flash is, and
Okay.
why do you like Flash over other kinds of paint?
Okay, so Flash is like a sign painter's emulsion, like poster paint. It is very brightly colored, and you can thin it down so it looks like watercolor, or you can use it a little thicker like acrylic. It dries with a matte finish, so it's not shiny like acrylic, which I like that matte finish. And I think cost-wise, you can buy like a tub of it for like $17 to $19, regardless of the color. And it's a fair amount of paint. So I'm always looking for ways to save money with art materials. So, you know, I'm most often at the hardware store over the art supply store. Yeah.
And then my second question was about this community studio. It, what are the biggest challenges? Would you suggest that if people kind of get into
The same business. The biggest challenges so far, well, one was space. So finding the right space to have something like that. So rent is still my biggest expense for that space. I was able to find a space that does not charge triple nets, which triple nets is kind of a real estate thing where they can add on costs for electricity, for fixing the roof, for the property management company. So you have to sort of watch for that. And this was the first time that I've ever negotiated a lease, which as an artist, I had no idea that you could just sort of approach a landlord and say, hey, I want to pay this much instead of this much. And sometimes they say yes. And so this was like a big lesson for me. So the cost of a space. The other thing I would say that's been a learning curve for me is just like how to let people know that this is what you're doing. So visibility. I'm generally on the shyer side, so approaching somebody and just kind of cold calling people and saying, hey, I have this thing and maybe you're interested. That was really hard. I'm getting much better at it, and it's a little easier for me to approach people as a business owner than it is as like a solo artist. So yeah, so that's been probably the biggest challenge. You know, this is on the second floor, so that's also somewhat frustrating. There's no ADA accessibility in that building, and that's a problem. You know, I feel bad about that when people can't access the space. But that would be a landlord, like the building owners would have to, you know, fix an elevator, bring everything up to code. It's like the whole thing, so. That's what I would say. So yeah, I would love it if more people did this kind of thing, but it's running a small business, so.
I was gonna ask, like, how would you compare the flash paint you were talking about to gouache paint? Is it similar in the way?
It's gouache, like artist gouache is opaque watercolor. It's, gouache is very expensive in the tube, right? So it's better, it's more affordable, flash. I think gouache though, you can reconstitute gouache and kind of change things up, which is like a good and bad thing about gouache. Flash is like acrylic when it dries. It's in place. You cannot move it. So those are the differences. Maybe the in between would be the acrylic gouache, which dries and looks like gouache, but it's acrylic. So that's also a really nice product. Again, it's small tubes, expensive. So flash is you get a little bigger tub. So, yeah.
Not much of a question. I just wanted to say how cool your piece was that had that visual partner of like the person swimming to stay above water.
Yeah.
Especially with it layered with all of the other context that you gave behind it, especially in regards of like, you know, a woman creating a cake back in like the 50s
Mm-hmm.
after like dinner was made, she would be expected to present that, and I think that was like a representation of like her worth and value.
Mm-hmm.
And then you also showed the pictures of like, I think you said it was your mom holding up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming your siblings in the water.
In the water, yeah.
Yeah, and then it's like you see this cake that's kind of like falling apart, and you see this person trying to swim to stay above water.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just really cool how layered that approach is, and it shows that same context.
Yeah, well, thank you for noticing all of that. It's a little, like, I'm glad that comes across. I feel like there's a lot of things that I bring into my work, and sometimes I'm thinking like, oh, maybe it's too many things, but I'm a maximalist at heart, so yeah.
It's really cool.
Thank you.
I also wanted to ask, did you like self-teach yourself with like the cake decorating, or did you ever work in cake decorating at all?
No, I didn't. I taught myself using those books, like the manuals, and I started making tons and tons of royal icing, which is that super hard, sugary icing. And actually now I can't, that smell makes me physically sick to smell the smell of it. So I made so much of it. And so I was, I learned that I took it, I'm like at heart a really good student, and I learned all the things and learned how to hold the tools, and but then I got to a point where I was like, well, this isn't really serving. I'm not going to go and become a cake decorator. I think I one time looked at the hours are they're like, you have to start at 4 a.m. or something. I don't think I could do that. But yeah, that's I learned that, and then I still kind of stuck. I've really latched on to a couple of the tools. So the ribbon tool, and then there's the one other kind of scallop tool that I use the most, yeah.
Yeah, I used to work in cake decorating.
Did you?
For a bit. I do it for fun sometimes, but I do love the ribbon one the most.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Like the flow and like the different type of textures you can achieve using that are really
Yeah, that one's a great tool. So textural and floppy, and yeah. So thank you guys, appreciate it.